the riverbanks are scary because a couple of weeks after the flood goes away, you're dealing with erosion and slumping from the riverbanks. Like, you're sort of almost not forgotten about the flood, but the flood's on the back burners because it's been 3 or 4 weeks, and all of a sudden a couple of acres of riverbank land just washes away in a heartbeat, as you can see in this footage. Like back where our shed was there, when that eroded, this must have been like a week, maybe 2 weeks after the flood. But with our farm there, where our corner shed was there, I think it must have been the first flood. I had my ute parked there. I got out, just walking around the riverbank, just checking it out and just seeing what's going on in the riverbank. And 40 minutes later, my brother rings me and he sends me a photo of the same spot and I was always mindful at the edge of the riverbank always falls in that little bit. So I parked a fair bit away, what I thought a fair bit away from the edge of the river, the edge of the bank, and 40 minutes later, this big hole was all in the river. So if I was there 40 minutes later with my ute there, I'd have been at the bottom of the water. It just collapsed out of nowhere. And I'm not talking, right on the edge of the riverbank. I'm talking at least 10 metres away from the edge of the riverbank towards the road. Just one big hole, 9 metres in the ground, just washed away to nowhere. So yeah, riverbanks are just scary when they go.
More so even next door, Richie, in that like their riverbank now is pretty much at the back of the shed. If you get another big flood, one of their sheds would nearly just about be in the river. So they've lost, there was probably 10 metres of land between that shed and the riverbank previously. That's all gone now, and the back corner of the shed's pretty much on the edge of the cliff.
Yeah, they're on that bit of a bend though.
Yeah.
Where it's coming down pretty straight and it's got to turn and it's just taking it away.
Riverbanks is obviously where your pumps usually are, so you lose your pump site. That's obviously the main thing the first priority is your pump site, because you can't start farming until you got water again. So you got to reinstate, or you got to salvage whatever you can of where your pump was. Like in the first 2 floods we had, where our pump was no longer there. We had to then reinstate those areas, get our pumps back in operation. Forget the rest of the banks, but yeah, just to reinstate a safe track for the tractor to get down to put a pump in, put your foot valves and all that stuff back in, rebuild yourself back up, a foundation, so it doesn't hopefully get washed away the next couple of floods. But yeah, the pumps is the first priority that you're trying to get back in reinstated anyway.
Because you see it that often now, we're a bit complacent. You might think you've made a safe decision to just go and inspect things. You don't know how far what's the safe distance from the riverbank after the river water has receded, where it won't pose a risk to anyone or collapse under your feet. And the more this happens, the more unstable the bank is, and obviously then, it's damaged pump sites, but also where do you pump from now? Like, you could put the pump site where it originally was, but you don't know how shallow or deep the water is. So yeah, a lot of things come into play, and a lot of us use electric pumps. So if your infrastructure's damaged, sometimes like people have lost power that's provided there, power poles getting washed away, power lines. It gets very costly, and you obviously got to involve contractors as well to do that sort of stuff. So there's always time delay as well as huge costs outlaid to reinstate all this pretty much basic infrastructure. But yeah, it's...
I suppose the work permits to be able to, we've been lucky, I suppose, we've been able to get in straight away and reinstate pump sites, but to do it properly and put some good infrastructure there, the work permits aren't always, it's not always just go for it. I know in most rules about working on your riverbanks, you're not supposed to touch within 40 metres of your riverbank. But I know that from what I've been told, and that's on the Hawkesbury River, but 40 metres of the riverbank, you can't surely just say, I can't work over there and move back 40 metres and expect to put a new pump site there. And to do some major works, like some parts of ours are taking some pretty major work, a lot of rock, putting there, all natural product, but I don't know if it, if it would pass these days or not. I don't know. If you don't fix it, we had to build a big wall out of concrete block just to save one power pole. That was the last power pole, and if we didn't do that, I'm not sure where we'd end up.
You wouldn't like the amount of work that's had to go back into reinstating riverbanks and pump site prior to having these floods. There would be no way you would even consider doing this sort of works, because you wouldn't be allowed to do it, first of all, and you wouldn't touch the riverbanks. But obviously in events like this where it's all washed away, the problem is, for instance, the first flood, we lost all that land there, and that eroded right back until about probably 5-6 metres off Frimsbeach Road, so right at the corner road. They had to actually move the telegraph pole. The telegraph pole was just about to fall in. That supplied the main power to Upper Hawkesbury and that. So that pole had to be relocated to more solid ground because the wood had washed away. They then had to build a 9 metre rock wall that went down about 9 metre rock wall right against the road bay, and that was just to support Frimsbeach Road, protect Frimsbeach Road. Because the problem is, if you leave these riverbanks the way that, like when they first erode out, the next flood, that adds more velocity, adds more sort of current for the water to dig it out. So the next flood, when the water's coming down, that's just going to dig those banks and get more. So you might lose a little section this time. Next time it's bigger, 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 until you're interfering with roads and sheds and stuff like that. That's why you reinstate and you have to look after the riverbanks, is because if you don't, it's just going to have a knock-on effect and keep washing everything away naturally.
It has happened. It has carved it away a fair bit, but it's hard for people to go and spend. You can spend a lot of money on riverbanks, and it's hard because it's a bit of no man's land where you own it but you don't. You own it but it's not really yours, and to go and spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on your riverbank and you can't farm it, but if you don't, where do you end up? You could end up losing 50, 100 metres of land over time. So doing it right is doing it right from the start is probably the best way. No cheap fix there.
Yeah, I'm pretty lucky. We don't have a high bank and we're on the inside of a bend. So on my side of the river, I don't get cut, but opposite to us in Cornwallis, they cop it really bad. Yeah, and I see what's been going on to revive them riverbanks. I think from what I can see, it went beyond what local government could handle. And there was a few people doing the right thing, a few people doing the wrong thing. And I think it probably wasn't managed 100% right. But I don't know, what can be done different, but...
and we all want to protect our asset and property, obviously, so that's hence, the importance of trying to stabilise riverbanks. And look, there's no right or wrong. A lot of people went into, quick repair, let's get it done mode, regardless of what authorities came and told them, don't do this, do that, what do you do here? But it just makes it very hard on any landowners and people down there when there's no one to, put their hand up and say, okay, this is what you can do and this is what you can't do, because there's too many grey areas and it's quite confusing and stressful on everyone involved too.
We're getting close to getting back to reinstating it to somewhat, but in that particular area, it was always been a real high bank, so very high up from the river. We've got on that corner, we've got a 200 odd and probably even older old barn. That's a historic barn that was on the property there. So when the first flood happened, we lost all that riverbank. We lost the support to that barn. So we lost the main support, fell down. We had to implement inside that shed. That sort of kept it up and kept everything. So our main priority at the time was we need to repair the riverbank to be able to protect that bit of history that's there. It's still currently standards, but it's been so long. We have to reinstate it. We had to get it back, and the only way you can do that with the amount of stuff that was lost was to bring in a certified fill back in there and compact it down. That's what we're finding works best, and then do it. So it's not so steep. Do it in your tiered or your batters. so you lessen that sort of the weight that has up above, and that way it future-proofs for the next, because it's going to flood again, for the next floods, and hopefully you don't wash away it doesn't collapse on you next time. And that's what we've been doing. We're getting close to the end of that stage of reinstating that area, and there'll be, I think by the time we finish, will be 3 or 4 tiers. There used to be one batter from the top down to the river. So we've stepped it out into 3 or 4 tiers now, and each of those tiers will be stepped back one to about 2 or 3 metres, and another tier go, and then that will just protect, help stabilise everything, and protect that. The thing, if you leave it like that, that just washes away. It's just like a whirlpool, and it's just water just to wash us through there, and that's just got unless you start and pack something, you've got to get solid base underneath. It's just going to keep happening because all that material there, it's real sandy, so sand just doesn't pack, just keeps collapsing.
Yeah, so at your nominal water level, what generally works is sandstone or natural boulders, quite large and like natural shape, and you just work it up higher than high tide, and then you work your batter from there, a gentle slope, and then revegetate that, and that tends to work well if you actually lay turf over it.
Yeah, what we found in the first flood, we used shale to reinstate our access tracks to our pump site. In the first flood, we used shale and then revegetated it. The next flood we come through, the shale just washed away because it didn't have enough binding to it, didn't pack down hard enough. So all that shale there, it just slumped away. Once the soil and stuff got wet underneath it, it just slumped away, and then we lost all the topsoils above that shale, just all went straight into the river. So the shale didn't have any sort of packing properties, it just didn't pack in there. When you're going with something that can pack, like a clay or something similar that can pack, and you use your rocks on your river edge, that helps, that gives us something stable so you can build up, gives you a foundation to build back from.
What we did when we first lost the pump site was, that's a picture of it there, we dug down below the water level and started using big boulders and pushed big boulders down to make a footing, and went far bigger than what the pump site needed to be, and kept coming up with lots of boulders and rip rock, and then as we got up, we just put a small layer of road base on there, so the whole thing is basically rock, and it hasn't moved since. On other parts of our riverbank work that was done many years before, when I was only young, was they battered back the riverbank, so sacrificed a portion of farmland, battered the riverbank back on a nice gentle slope, and grew certain varieties of trees on there, and they seem to have really done their job. And having the riverbank battered back, obviously when the water's flowing fast and going past it, there's no weight on top of that to collapse it in, and that's probably a 40-year-old project, and that's still as it was back then. So it's the only places where we don't have all those heavy tree numbers and batters is at our pump sites, but we've been able to fix we've got a really good plan on how to fix our next pump site, which is going to be exactly the same as that one, and you can overcome it, but having deep, sharp dropping riverbanks doesn't work where you've got massive flow of water. It just doesn't work. You've got to have batter or tier, definitely.
And obviously the higher the riverbank, the more cause for you have to go back even further to try and contain that 1 in 3 or 1 in 4 slope.
You don't want to just you can't just put, whatever you have to obviously you lose lots, so whatever you have to refill, you can't just put rubbish in there. You've got to have something that can, you can't just keep putting rubbish, you can't put rubbish on the riverbanks, you've got to reinstate it back. But you need, like Paul said, you need some foundation from whether that's in the rock or whatever it is. You need something solid underneath before you can build up on top. Like building anything, it's just you can't. That first time where we used the shale, at the time seemed fine, seemed compacted, but as soon as the next lot of water comes, it just didn't have no. It just shale just eventually just breaks up through what we use that time, and everything we had done just washed away.
Well, we're lucky where we are because we're actually on a straight. We're not on a bend. You get a lot more washout if you're on a bend, on the outside of a bend. But where we are, we've lost a couple of willow trees into the river now, and the last two, even the small floods, the second last one we lost our pump site. So same thing as the boys, just big boulders, built a foundation and came up from that with some concrete blocks and road base on top. And but the proof's in the pudding. Even next door from the 22 flood, the 14 metre flood next door, we battered the riverbank back probably about a 60 metre long section and put couch grass on it, and it hasn't moved a millimetre since. Just a gradual batter, and it hasn't moved. It's perfect.
It's the first thing you go and check, and then when you hear that story there, that's probably not the first thing you should go and check. You should probably wait a couple of weeks before you go and check it.
You got to be so careful. And like, for my instance there, where I parked, like I said, I was well away from the rivers. Even when I was walking there, I was probably looking over like this. I was probably a metre or something from the actual erosion edge. To think where my ute was parked 40 minutes later was in a big hole, you just would not comprehend. Like if you see the photos of where it was, like I'm talking, I don't know exact numbers, but it would have had to be at least 6 to 10 metres away from where the river is, where my ute was parked, right next to Freemsbeach Road, which is the main road where you on top of solid ground, sort of road base almost. There's no way you think it's going to go. And for it just to go in one big crater, like you dropped the bomb, is just unreal. And you got to be so careful, and the riverbanks are so dangerous because you can hear them just sort of slipping away. That's really
Remember
bad.
after that flood, and we come along Freeman's Reach Road, and your pods, the irrigation pods, were they yours?
I think they were. Yeah.
All over the road, and we helped you
Yeah.
put them on the riverside there. Like in hindsight, it was a bit dumb.
Yeah. Like you just don't. You just
don't know.
You just don't know. The riverbanks are so unpredictable. And in the first flood, I think what done the damage at the time, we had a lot of local rain when we had the first real big flood.
So everything was soft.
Everything was soft. Yeah. The ground had saturated, and that's what was happening. You're literally getting, when you look at the river, you're getting pockets of water just coming out. All your underground water from all the paddocks and all the rain had to get out somewhere. And on the riverbank, you've got sand material, so it finds that softer thing, and it's just pushing water holes in it. And that will happen weeks afterwards, and that just liquefies. And once you have too much weight above that, whether it's gravel, whether it's just too much dirt above, it just pops away. And that's what it was. It wasn't so much erosion, it was just the slumping and the slush just eventually getting out. The way we're reinstating them now, they seem to be holding up from what we've seen so far. But definitely, to build it back to what we had first time, 9 metres high, one straight sort of steep batter back to the river and just fill it back up with sand or topsoil. Next flood, it's going to do the exact same thing because there's no way you can stabilise that. And you have all these big willow trees and big trees along the river. They're all fine, but once they die off, and you got one by itself, you have one that falls over. Then that's what creates a more of a problem because that takes down with the root mass, takes a big chunk of dirt with it. So once that tree falls, takes a heap of dirt, then the water just comes in and just eats away. Whirlpool motion just stays eating away at it. Where if the trees that worked well, those smaller willows that aren't so top heavy, they're younger trees, and there was a cluster of them, they held those steep banks better because there's a cluster of root mass under there with the combination of the turf to help that held it. But where you got your big individual, gum trees or whatever big trees are along the riverbank, once they fall, they take everything with it, and that's where a lot of your damage starts. You get something like that, a big tree or something falling like that, and then everything just happens around it. It should be, and it is. Like it's a lot of work. Well, back when I was too young for it, but I know stories of mum and dad and that. They used to have I don't even know what it's called, but the locals used to get around. They used to have like a group or whatever to reinstate riverbanks and plantings on the riverbanks because at times they're having a lot of problems and thing. So I remember seeing photos of mum planting tube stock plants.
It was the county council.
Was it? Yeah.
Hawkesbury River County Council.
So all that work they done then, 30 years without a flood or anything like that, your riverbanks you just leave them because you don't go there besides your pump and you maintain around it. But your big steep batters where all these plantings is, 30 years, everything you put there grows bigger, and it's ultimately unmaintained. You're just leaving it. So it was no surprise that we had so much damage come the first flood, because it's been so long without anybody doing any work to. At riverbanks, you didn't think of your riverbanks. It was just the riverbank was there, but back when they were having floods, you're thinking about it. You're doing things to reinstate or doing things to protect the banks. When you have 30 years, you forget about what they are. And now we're at the stage where we've had floods, and riverbank restoration is something you think about now. So you do things to protect it for now. So
Everyone's, I think they're a bit more confused, or no one wants to own it, or even no. They don't have a list of basic, like I was saying earlier, do's or don'ts, what you can or can't do. And a lot of farmers here are proactive, and they know what works and what doesn't, with all the experience and all the years of
That's
seeing
what it
this.
comes back to.
Just
It
knowing.
comes back to
the
local knowledge.
That's right, the local
And everyone
knowledge.
knows what happens at the back of their property.
That's right. So,
But that doesn't replicate for the whole river.
No,
you know.
exactly right.
This is what
Yeah.
we do there. It doesn't mean that we could do it across the river that's on a slight bend, because that's the exact opposite of the water only goes one way. Absolutely. It always flows out to sea, but what we do on our side isn't what someone can do on that side. So there is no rule that goes the whole way along. I think battering is the first and foremost. Everyone should batter their riverbanks and be allowed to batter their riverbanks, but obviously without regular maintenance, you end up with a hole in the riverbank like Cornwallis, which seems to be a problem that looks like it's impossible to fix.
the longer you leave it, the more impossible it's going to become.
That's the thing. So, yeah, there is a lot of rules out there of what you can and can't do, but if you're just allowed to do it, don't be silly about it. But if you're allowed to do it and make it stable, it could save a disaster like that. For what I see there, that's another problem waiting to happen. I can see it's already eroded down. That's another problem waiting to happen with those trees up on top and being so steep. But it's probably something, I think a lot of government money should be spent on riverbanks and waterways in the form of grant, because everyone knows what they have to do at the back. But you can't just get one contractor to come in and say, I'm going to do this all the way along, because it doesn't work. But a lot of money needs to be spent on riverbanks.
And doing nothing is just as negligent, because we're all relying on the water. There's fisheries down the river, and there's, big boating scene in our area. So a lot of ski boats, wake boats, all that sort of thing. So for their safety as well, in the summertime, they come on in. Riverbeds are always changing. What might have been once 8 metres deep might only be 0.8 metres deep. You don't know. The water hides a lot of things, and we want to protect that asset, have clean water and a safe waterway for everyone, really.
Well, it goes down to almost one lane there now, way back up the stream a bit.
Quarterangi.
Yeah, I don't know whereabouts it is, but
So,
you only got a little channel you can go through now. That
Back Ebenezer.
you only got one little channel.
Only
It's
very
30 metres
dangerous.
wide.
So, and a lot of outsiders will drive in, and you hear of tourists drowning down on the river. There's a beach there. It's parts of the riverbed are probably like quicksand under that water. It's so dangerous. A waterway like that in the summer, want people to enjoy it as well.
Pull up at a
So-
nice beach and the riverbank collapses down on top of you.
Yeah, I mean,
It's a big safety issue. It is a big issue, very big issue.
yeah, a lot of time and effort, months and months in some circumstances, just to bolster. We had a few gaping holes in our riverbank. I lost count at about 100 truck and quad dogs of big boulders in one hole alone, just to try and stabilise it, because not 40 metres away are 2 sheds and 2 houses, so we don't want that sort of all washed down the river.